Ad Infinitum is the only podcast solely focused on audio ads.
Advertising.
The creatives who make them, and or the latest thinking that informs them, how the space is evolving, and, my favorite part, a roundup of recent audio ads and analysis by yours truly,
Ad campaign.
Stu Redwine, VP Creative at Oxford Road, and each episode's guest. This is Season 2, Episode 10, titled Congruent Cues, exploring the alchemy of audio and its particularly potent powers when all the sounds, voices, and music of a brand are congruent, and how audio captivates listeners and drives engagement in an increasingly multi-sensory world. And there's a really significant piece of research by Sentient Decision Science that shows there's an 86% correlation between our subconscious emotional response to a sound and our conscious desire to engage with or avoid an experience. That's why it's so important to show up congruently in audio so that people are having the type of emotional response that we want. We want to design that, and then that's consistent anytime they hear the sound of our brand. And of course, a study we talk about a lot on Ad Infinitum is from Ipsos, showing that sonic brand cues deliver 7 times better brand recall than visual cues, really all other brand cues, if you think about it. And that also makes the case that it's so critical that you're consistent, that you're congruent in the way that you show up in audio. And that's why our guest today is Chelsea Campbell, Group Creative Director at Studio Resonate, SiriusXM's in-house audio agency. Chelsea is a creative powerhouse in experiential audio, driving projects that bring brands to life through innovative soundscapes. Her work spans everything from sonic branding to immersive storytelling. And today, we'll unpack her approach to audio as a key branding tool. Chelsea, welcome to Ad Infinitum.
Thank you, Stu. Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. Today, we're diving into a topic that is invisible but powerful, like electricity. I always think of that. You can't see it, but it can kill you. In this case, you can't see it, but it can make all the difference. I guess it can kill the performance of your campaign, like if you don't do it right.
It can kill or make a brand. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Let's go positive. Congruence in audio, congruent cues. And this really came up as part of the Audio is Magic presentation that you put together, and our head of accounts and myself attended at SiriusXM Studios in Hollywood earlier this year. Can you give listeners a brief summary of the Audio is Magic presentation? Like, what is it, and then how did you come up with it?
Absolutely. So Audio is Magic is a live, immersive, multi-sensory experience. Those words are a bit overused, but they genuinely apply to this experience. And in it, we reveal the secrets behind the magic of audio and audio marketing. Our audiences, they leave the experience, they leave the room with a better understanding of how audio can help achieve marketing objectives. And we try to arm them with fresh thinking to invigorate their brand's audio presence. We do this all in 30 minutes. As I mentioned before, it's live, it's in person. Within the experience, we break down audio marketing into 5 categories of sonic ID, music, sound design, technology, and voice. And within each of those categories, we reveal some audio marketing tips and tricks. We explore audio illusions. There's some in-room magic, and we learn about brands that are really doing audio marketing well. And we do this all without any screens. We've been told that it's a very informative and entertaining experience, but the best part of it is hearing people at the end feel inspired with fresh ideas, and there's lots of spontaneous brainstorms that happen in the room, which always feel very natural, and that's exactly the desired outcome.
Well, that's absolutely what I experienced for sure. And I think it is super cool. It's nice that you highlighted, yes, it's in person, which is awesome. And 2, it didn't really dawn on me until you just said it, that there's no screens.
Yeah.
Like, that's interesting. It was completely auditory. Like, it was. Like, you had some props, which was cool. I don't want to give away too much, but there was some cool... Like, if you get a chance to attend to any chief audio officers, and I believe that there's one coming up in New York in October, if you are able to attend it, it's absolutely worth going to experience it yourself.
Yeah, it's intentionally designed to be something a bit different from the marketing presentations that these chief audio officers, CMOs, and other senior folks are subject to, I'll say. It's been designed to speak to our most senior clients at tentpole industry events like CES, Cannes Lion, and part of our thinking was, well, what is missing from these events and where can audio provide that? These events are sometimes overly sensorial, that they're a bit intense to say the least. And we do a different audio immersive experience every year. And we always try to provide something that is at once refreshing and revitalizing while also being, infotainment, if you will.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's experiential because a lot of times in these presentations, like I'm very inclined for the practical to like, tell me, how does this work? Boots on the ground. Like I've got to go back to work on Monday. How do I make this work? And that's what I liked about Audio is Magic is that it's like, it's not, let me give you a fact or figure on a screen and tell you how something worked on some campaign that I may or may not reveal who the client was. It's like, oh, let me play you this piece of audio and explain to you sonic ID, sound design, voice, music, technology with real world examples. And then, like you said, it was a natural, lively discussion at the end with the group that I was with. And I think it was like us. And then it was like a dozen people from a single brand or a single agency that's working with a single brand that was at the one that I was at. And I mean, I've been in a lot of those situations where, well, does anybody have any questions or anything want to come up? And it's just, crickets. And this was a lot more, engaging because you just experienced. So what we wanted to do and what I talked to you about, and I'm grateful that you're willing to do, is share a couple of the elements from the Audio is Magic presentation here on Ad Infinitum. So I want to explore that with you. And the couple that we talked about, of course, we're talking primarily on this episode about congruence. So we're going to get into that with the ads that we grade about how some massive advertisers are showing up in audio and are they being congruent or are they being incongruent? But on our journey there, I wanted to talk about a couple other elements that do come out in Audio is Magic as well, and those are psychoacoustics and priming. So why don't we start with psychoacoustics? Tell me about psychoacoustics, Chelsea.
Psychoacoustics. It's as interesting as it sounds.
Yes, exactly.
It's fascinating. Yeah, it's how we can use sound and sound design to mess with people's minds. We can use theater of the mind to paint pictures in people's minds, to transport listeners to faraway places, to make them feel like they are participating in your ad experience through a first-person audio lens. But we are also objects of psychoacoustics every single day as we move through the world and we hear sounds around us. So, it really is how sound design impacts our perception of the world. And as sound designers, we can use psychoacoustics to impact our listeners' perception of their environment and their world.
Well, it sounds like I'm hearing the pitter patter of rain. That's such a lovely sound. In the show prep, you were telling me, Chelsea, that you are someone who has a positive reaction. Was it to nature sounds in general, or is it specifically to rain sounds?
Well, I love nature, but rain is what really gets me. I'm a pluviophile. I love the sound of rain. It calms me. Yeah, it relaxes me. I love the smell of rain.
Well, what's weird is this rain smells like bacon. Why is that? Why does this rain smell like bacon?
Because it is bacon stew. This is the sound of bacon frying. Psychoacoustics is the key to our intrinsic perception of the world. Psychoacoustics is how we interpret the sounds around us, and it impacts everything from, how we feel to our spatial awareness to our comfort levels.
It's so much about perception, isn't it? I mean, it was wild to me that when I'm listening to the rain and thinking it's rain, I'm seeing rain and it sounds a lot like rain. And then as soon as I have that new piece of information, this is bacon. I could see bacon. It's just wild how that all works. Boom, psychoacoustics. So it's trickery. It's using the theater of the mind to... I love that because it's like when you're watching a show and, if anyone who's had any experience watching behind the scenes or being on sets even, it's like just outside the frame is this whole other world. It's not what you're seeing happening isn't happening.
Oh, yeah, the Foley design.
Yeah, but you experience it. So it's so cool that, you can, for instance, this sound of rain is actually the sound of bacon frying. It strikes the appropriate tone and makes us feel and think of the appropriate things. It doesn't matter what the sound, quote unquote, really is.
Right. And part of that is through priming. It's priming the environment. It's priming the experience. Listeners thought that was the sound of rain because we were talking about it and because, their hearing and their mind were aligned on that and they drew that conclusion. And that's the power of priming. And It can have, wonderful impact on your audio advertising, on your audio marketing. And it can also be used for, a bit of trickery and a bit of deception.
And that's the thing. I know we've got another sample we're going to play here. Was that also the bit that we did in the experience with the cards with the different words? Is that considered priming, or is that something else?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's priming. That was actually from quite a famous TikTok video, and people were hearing a chant, and especially in North America, they were hearing a lot of, it was a football chant from a soccer stadium where the whole crowd was chanting something. And when this TikTok video was shared, audiences in North America especially were hearing other things being said. So that was partly priming of the online community. But I think it's also important to think about context here. And, the English accent of the folks chanting the song was really being misinterpreted, partly because it sounded probably a bit foreign to some of the audiences.
Yeah, and it's like the age-old thing with song lyrics. Like, we built this city on rock and roll when I was a kid. I remember belting it, like jumping on the couch cushions because the floor was lava. And I thought it was, we built the city on hot lava. I was like, we built this city. We built this city on hot lava. So these are cool tools that just when you listen to a lot of audio ads, even that shift in the sound from the rain to the bacon frying, that's one example of many other things that can work like that. And then what's so fascinating to me is if I use my inner observer and watch myself listening to that and then hearing the shift, like even in my own mind, it sounds more like bacon once I know it's bacon. And it sounded more like rain when I thought it was rain.
Doesn't it? Yes.
Yes. So it's like, man, that unlocks a lot of really cool creativity. It's just difficult. Oh, there's such a gravitational pull just down towards very plain, very simple audio. And we'll get more into that. So the other thing, and we kind of just touched on it here, was priming. You've got a great example of priming. Let me play that audio clip.
Green needle. Brainstorm. Green needle. Brainstorm.
Okay, what is going on with the green needle brainstorm, Chelsea? What am I hearing there?
You are hearing the very talented senior creative director of Studio Resonate, Nils Dollaire, who is the author of the Audio is Magic experience. You're hearing him play the exact same audio spot twice, but he's priming us with a different word each time. And then, I don't know about you, but when he primed us with green needle, I heard green needle. And when he primed us with brainstorm, it sounded a bit like brainstorm, if I'm honest. But it was the same clip.
Perception is reality, I guess. It's kind of like the gold and the blue dress, but that's another great example. And there was others like these where you can alter people's perception, and you can just think of ways that could be used in an advertisement to be more creative with your message to get people to go, oh, and like to listen. So very cool. Like I said, Audio is Magic is an incredible experience to attend yourself. Chief Audio Officers strongly recommend that, and we'll mention how to get in touch with Chelsea and her team at the end of the episode if you want to attend one of those. So we talked earlier about congruence. This whole episode is called Congruent Cues. I really do personally believe that more than anything is the most important. Like, I believe that every brand has a sonic identity already, right? Just by default, to whatever extent it currently exists, it exists, right? Whether that's the sound of their product, the sound of their founder's voice, however they've decided to show up in audio, there's some kind of baseline. And then it's a question of, how strategic and intentional can you be in designing it further to accomplish a specific goal? But a brand that comes up time and time again for everyone is the Home Depot when it comes to congruence. And I'm late to the party. But in Gina Isham's Sound and Marketing episode about the Home Depot Sonic brand, I found out that song that we all know and love started out as like a single campaign, and then they extended it further and further and further. And of course, Josh Lucas's voice and their tagline, which has changed a couple times, but they're consistent, and they commit to it once they've made a change. Home Depot's got a lot of congruence sonically when it comes to their brand. When you think about it, and as you guys do your work at Studio Resonate, can you explain congruence in a bit more depth from your point of view?
Yeah, we can think of congruence as when things align across our various senses. So this is a really powerful tool in marketing, as we know. And with a brand like the Home Depot, the congruence here is, it's like, let's all become synesthetes for a minute, right? Let's think about the VO, that famous voice of the brand. What words would you use to describe his voice, Stu?
Rugged, trustworthy, confident, inspiring. Those are a few.
Yeah, those are exactly what I was thinking. And if I were going to if I needed to do some work on my house or on a property and I wanted some guidance or information from somebody that works in a shop, those are all words that I might use to describe the experience in there, right? Like inside the store, it's a bit rugged, but you trust them. You're in there for a reason. You know, it's these different elements that are congruent with the brand. So we have the voice actor's style, we have his voice, and then we've got their sonic anthem, which is, it's gritty, it's powerful, it feels like it's moving you forward. And then you've got their tagline where doers get more done. Like that song makes me feel like getting stuff done. You know, it feels like a ballad that you could work to, that you could accomplish something to. And then you have the actual spots themselves. So congruence is the alignment of all of these different elements of a brand. And let's not forget the visuals of the brand. Let's not forget their iconic orange, which, as Gina's podcast highlighted, was almost a happy accident in how the brand landed on orange. So it's definitely worth a listen for anyone who's intrigued by what we're talking about. But, you know, the orange speaks to the safety vests that you see in outdoor construction. It speaks to like safety, but it also speaks to creativity. Orange is one of the most creatively inspiring colors. I did not just make that up.
I know you didn't. And it feels right. It's got an aggression to it, you know, where like I think of red as super aggressive, and then yellow would be more like maybe creative and passive, and orange sits there in the middle. And a bit of that caution or safety undertone is also helpful, because that is important when you're doing that kind of stuff for sure. And it's just interesting, like you're saying, the happy accident with the color, in a sense the happy accident with the song, but once they arrived there and it all locked in, they've been committed to it over time. So in one respect, what I'm hearing you say is congruence is, you know, in a multisensory way, making sure that you're consistent across all senses, which Home Depot, you know, whether by design or by accident, a little bit of both, they do well. And then it seems like a piece of it also is like congruence through time, that there's a consistency element as well that's important.
Yes, and you mentioned the word commitment. That is probably, you know, as important, if not more important than the individual assets themselves, is the brand's commitment to using them over time, but deploying them across multiple marketing channels and reinforcing these elements of the brand through TV, through audio advertising, through social. That's how you create a strong brand sonic ecosystem.
Yeah, and I know you put together an example of like a bizarro world Home Depot spot to sort of illustrate incongruence, which I actually think sounds a lot like a lot of folks' advertisements where they don't have the strong central core like the Home Depot does that's so clear on what their sonic identity is. And so they show up differently in different places. So let me play this alternate multiverse Home Depot spot and see how it feels to our listeners.
It's time to turn inspiration into perspiration. From planning to progress to perfection, the Home Depot gives you the power to do it yourself and the powerful tools to get it all done. Find the top home improvement brands at the best prices at the Home Depot, where doers get more done.
That's so wild.
Oh, it sounds like a confused brand, if ever I heard one.
It's almost like it makes me want to do that in like conversations with brands to illustrate the point. I mean, that's such a great, in stark relief. You're like, oh, they would never do that. Like, it's almost like, you know, this is apocryphal. I can't even believe that that piece of audio exists, right? The Home Depot would never. And yet, I don't think if you have a strongly defined like core, you're going to find yourself showing up differently all over the place, even though that's an extreme example.
Yes, it's an extreme example that has been used to demonstrate the strength of their brand. But to your point, if we had all of those elements written down on paper, you could see how the confusion may arise and how something like that could get produced, because that script on paper, not too far off a Home Depot spot, the VO, let's cast an English accent. People trust English accents, apparently. And then let's use some sort of like a calming, like a string soundtrack, because we want people to think of their future home as one of elegance and luxury and the world they can create there. So, just by that rationalization, you can see how without being intentional, and if you don't think about the congruence of your brand on a bigger scale and across all of your channels, mistakes like that can slip through the cracks.
You did such a great job there of the rational mind, rationalizing the way through to that output. And there's also a case to be made where maybe strings would be appropriate for Home Depot. And I know as we were talking about, it's we both already knew about a version of the Home Depot spot because it's striking where they did use strings. And so let me play that right now.
What kind of person would come here at 5:45 a.m.? Well, there's Carly, a carpenter, just like her dad. There's Juan. He's building a house and a better life. Kenton and Sadie are here because the couple that grouts together stays together. Mary's a drama teacher. She'll do anything for her students, even build sets before class. Lamar needs a torch and clamps for welding school. Ed's putting in a pool for a friend. We all need an Ed. That's who's in our parking lot at 5:45 a.m. Real customers made for doing. And at the Home Depot, everything we do for them.
Bravo. It's crazy. That gets me.
I got tingles.
Yeah, it's powerful and beautiful. It's the song. It fits the moment of the morning. And you can see that's where they would take the same kind of thinking you were going through, but it manifests in that way because they have a North Star, because they have their sonic identity defined. They can then bring it to life with strings, but they're no, we're not going to depart from our voice. It's still Josh Lucas, but tonally, it's closer to the incongruent example spot in many regards.
Yes, but what I love about what they've done is it was built from a real, not even insight, it was built from a real consumer moment. The people that wait for the stores to open. And that's a special community. You know that if you're in there regularly waiting for the store to open, you nod to the person in the car next to you. I bet there's a little community in Home Depots across America of people who wait for the shops to open. And that's what makes that spot absolutely flawless, is that the creative strategy is perfectly aligned with the brand and the audience.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Home Depot continues to be the gold standard out there for how to show up in audio with intent and a good strategic thinking behind it. So let's see how a couple other top spenders are showing up in audio. So what we did is we looked at Magellan for top spenders in podcast and Media Monitors for top spenders in radio to get a sense of who is spending the most in both of those channels and see if they're showing up with congruence across audio. And the two at the top of that list are T-Mobile and Progressive. So if it's all right with you, Chelsea, let's get into listening to and grading some ads.
Let's dive in.
Okay, first up, here is a national radio spot from T-Mobile.
Say hola to T-Mobile's Go 5G Plus plan and stay connected with los tuyos. Plus, get the new Samsung Galaxy S24 on us when you switch. And now, it's easier than ever to join T-Mobile with your eligible matrícula consular. With 24 monthly bill credits for well-qualified customers plus tax and $35 device connection charge. Contact us before canceling entire account to continue bill credits or credit stop and balance on required finance agreement due. Bill credits end if you pay off device early. See T-Mobile.com.
There we go. First one out the gate.
And they're off.
How about we do this? How about we listen to T-Mobile's podcast spot? Or do you want to comment? Go ahead.
I'd say the music bed is good for a music listening environment. It leans into the good mood that people are seeking when they listen to the radio. Yeah, let's listen to the podcast one.
That's what I'm thinking too, because I mean, we're really looking at this with this congruence lens. Let's look at it like that. Then we'll get out our measuring sticks.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So that's recent radio ad from Vivix that we pulled. It's got pretty heavy rotation. And then we've got a podcast ad here. Here we go.
With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that big win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers.
With T-Mobile, you can get tons of benefits and still save, because nobody likes having to choose. It's like getting romance and sci-fi.
I love you. Also, I'm a robot.
At T-Mobile, you can get the benefits you want and still save on every plan versus AT&T and Verizon. See how with our savings calculator at T-Mobile.com/switch. Plus, switch and keep your phone. We'll pay it off up to $800.
Via virtual prepaid card in 15 days. Qualifying unlocked device credit service and timely redemption required. Card has no cash access and expires in 6 months. See T-Mobile.com.
Okay, there we have it. That is a podcast ad and a radio ad from T-Mobile. Are they congruent, Chelsea?
Are they the same brand, Stu? I'll tell you what was congruent in them both. Wall-to-wall VO.
Yes, and about 50% disclaimer.
Yes. Yeah, so there's some consistency. I liked the little bit of, they did a bit of like world building in the podcast ad. There was a little bit of sound design. They did bring in a music bed, and then they squished in both of the spots, they squished in the Sonic ID before the short novel of a disclaimer. And it just felt like too much information was trying to be communicated. And I couldn't have told you it was T-Mobile if there was no brand mention or Sonic ID. Absolutely not. And that's what we're talking about with congruence. You should be able to get a sense of the brand from every single touch point. And with those examples, I couldn't have told you which brand it was or even what vertical it was for without the brand mention. And it didn't feel like the spot was built around the Sonic ID. And a good Sonic ID should just be the bed of a Sonic ecosystem that the rest of the creative is built from.
I agree with you. I mean, they were idiosyncratic. You know, in the first one, the radio one, it sounded like there was some Spanish in the middle of it. I got the sense it's perhaps for a Spanish-speaking audience, even from the VO, but they just didn't match up nicely. And it's funny because I've been seeing some it's on OTT, so it's on streaming, so I'm not sure if it's on television as well, but I've been seeing these T-Mobile spots where they have the two actors from Suits, and they sing the Sonic logo. They go do-do-do-do-do with their voice. And I feel like I've seen another spot where they had people do that. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Like, that would be a cool motif to roll out, but then wildly different than what you and I just listened to in those two different spots. You can just kind of see the thinking behind it is like, we've got to crank out something for audio. I agree with you in the second one has that bit about like, they're trying to be clever with the sci-fi and the romance. So it's like, you know, they do attempt that dings them from an audiolytics standpoint. So audiolytics score wise, the radio one got a 67% and the podcast one got a 68%, which is about what I would expect. Is pretty typical, pretty average. Everybody falls right in about 65 to 75%. Our target for all in-market creative is a 90%. And they just lacked clarity. They lacked simplicity. And they also made this massive trade in the amount of time that they spent. Like if you take the second one in particular, you take the disclaimer plus that creative, playful setup, which does have, there's a case to be made for that. But like you take that out, you take the disclaimer out, there's not much information getting transmitted, and it's not super clear who it is that's talking to me anyway. So there's room for improvement definitely for T-Mobile, I think, just from a messaging standpoint. But then like what you and I are talking about from a congruent standpoint, these don't even sound like the same brand other than you just have the do. Like that would be the only thing that would really make you know.
And it's such a shame because they are a brand that has a well-known Sonic ID and they've built equity in it. And like with that OTT spot with the folks from Suits, like they are thinking about using it in creative ways, but they're just not extending that across all the platforms. And with these two spots, they're trying to do too much within each of them. And they would be better off doing less with more spots. You know, do some brand building in one spot and then use another spot more strategically to drive the performance messaging home.
With that said, if you were going to assign them a score, are we doing letters? Are we doing numbers? What is the Chelsea Campbell audio scoring metric? Is it out of 10? Most people go with out of 10, but you could also do it out of 100. You could use colors.
Let's do out of 10.
Okay.
I'll do a color and a number. The radio spot is an aggressive purple. I won't say magenta, the brand color. It's an aggressive purple because it's a bit off. And I think I'd give it a 5 if I'm being generous.
All right. That's a generous 5 with some aggressive purple. What about podcast?
The podcast spot is a murky sea monster green, and they can have a 5.5.
All right. This is the best. Thank you for playing the game. It's like one of my favorite quotes of all time is from Ready Player One, where he goes, "Thank you, Parsival. Thank you for playing my game." That's all I want. I just want people to play the game with me. So thank you for playing the game. That's all we need to do. Just play.
Yes. Life's too short to not.
Oh, come on. Life is to be lived. Let's have fun. And while we're having fun, we also want to make sure we're properly insured. And that's why this next segment is brought to you by Progressive. Let's listen to a couple ads from Progressive Insurance. This is how they showed up in radio recently. Here we go.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds, which could be life-changing. I mean, you could put that money towards concert tickets for your daughter to see that singer who sings about painful breakups. And one song will inspire your little beauty to break up with that beast she's dating, Brian. Instead, she'll date someone who's nice and worthy of her love, not someone who addresses you and your spouse as bro. And it's all because you could save money switching at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, not available in all states.
Okay, there we go. Progressive doing what they do, having fun with it in radio. Let's listen to the podcast ad, and then we'll talk about them. Here we go.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. What if comparing car insurance rates was as easy as putting on your favorite podcast? With Progressive, it is. Just visit the Progressive website to quote with all the coverages you want. You'll see Progressive's direct rate, then their tool will provide options from other companies so you can compare. All you need to do is choose the rate and coverage you like. Quote today at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
And there we have the podcast one. So, I mean, straight out the gate, I feel like Progressive's coming in with a stronger offering. What do you think, Chelsea?
Definitely a stronger offering. I have a question about the podcast one. Do you know if that was the host doing a host read?
It looked like it was. From all I can tell, that is the host of the Spooked podcast doing a host read. If it's not the host, it would be a producer, but I believe it was the host.
Okay, cool. What I loved about those two ads is that they were serving different functions. I thought the radio ad was excellent. I'm going to give that an 8, maybe an 8.5. I thought they did a really good job of reaching the demographic, driver, parents. The VO performance was top notch. And the thing with car insurances, especially when you're advertising on radio or streaming audio, is that you can't really talk about the thing you're insuring because you can't use any sound effects that might jar the driver or create a situation that makes the driver or the passengers feel unsafe. So you don't want to play any sirens or anything for obvious reasons. So what was great about that spot was that they created this daydreaming moment. So you can imagine just driving along and you're sort of daydreaming. And that's where I went with the spot. I thought it was a really good use of the medium, good script, clear audio production, for radio. That was clean. It wasn't too cluttered. And it was doing a brand building, upper funnel job. While in the podcast, we had a host read. It sounded like it was a verbatim script. So it sounded like they were reading the exact script provided by the client. And it served a different function. And for that, I think it's an example of a brand using their different channels to reach different marketing goals and different KPIs. And I think that's a great use of their marketing budget, personally.
And what color would you give the radio spot? And then what color and number would you give the podcast spot?
The radio spot was a sky blue because it had me daydreaming up in the clouds. And the podcast spot, it was gray because it was quite black and white.
Okay. And what number would you give? You gave 8 to their radio. What do you give to their podcast creative?
Let's give it a 6.5 because I think the host read was good for quite dry content.
All right. So blended, you give it an 8 and a 6.5. So we've got 14.5. So an average of about 7.25. Audiolytics standpoint, these two ads scored a 70% and a 71%. So they outperformed the T-Mobile spots because they are more clear. They've got a clear offering and information in there. There's more that could be done. You know, they could be tightened up, but they're definitely stronger than the T-Mobile spots. And I think, as you highlighted, they're being congruent in the fact that you can feel that they're being intentional where they're showing up. That's kind of my takeaway from this, is that Progressive is being intentional and T-Mobile does not feel as intentional. And so to me, it's like they're way ahead in that regard, even though it's not like they're not using a consistent song. They're not using a consistent voice. There isn't a consistent tagline. There isn't a mnemonic, but they're honoring where the ad is showing up. And there is a through line sort of in the what if setup of the two ads, where the one is going, you could save a bunch and that would be life-changing. Let me tell you about that potential scenario. And then what if switching your insurance was as easily as switching to your favorite podcast? So they kind of, both of them tee you up with like, let me get you to think about this, Progressive. But like you pointed out, the one feels like, oh, this was designed to show up in radio here, and this was designed to show up in podcast here, where the T-Mobile spots are like, man, these feel like they were kind of thrown together.
Yeah, and I think this is a great lesson for all the chief audio officers who are listening and wondering, oh, we don't have a mnemonic, we don't have the jingle, we don't have a sonic ID. How quickly can we build one? How quickly can we implement one? Here you have a brand that has a very well-established sonic ID with solid equity invested in it. And as you said, Stu, they're not intentional about how they're showing up in each of these different platforms. They're just squishing the sonic ID in the middle. And then you have another brand that doesn't have a sonic ID and is scoring higher than everyone else, is creatively a bit more brave, a bit more strategic, and a bit more thoughtful about how they're showing up in audio.
And it's like, that's the big takeaway for chief audio officers, is not necessarily setting the bar at straight out the gate, you need to be the Home Depot. It's, you can be thoughtful and you can be strategic and intentional regardless of where your current sonic brand is in its evolution.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, Chelsea, this has been a ton of fun. I know there was one other spot we were supposed to talk about, and I'm going to bring it in here at the end for you to talk a bit more about Studio Resonate, the work you do, this Patron spot, and then how people can contact you and what they would need to do if they wanted to come experience Audio is Magic for themselves. So before you take us on that whole spiel, let's listen to this Patron spot, and then we'll get out of here.
Paloma. Paloma. Here's to a summer made sensational. Tequila Patron. The perfect way to enjoy Patrones responsibly. Copyright 2022, imported by Patron Spirits Company. Coral Gables, Florida. Tequila 40% ABV.
Lovely. All right. I felt like I was there. So why don't you use that spot to uniquely segue into telling us more about Studio Resonate and how to experience Audio is Magic for ourselves?
Smooth. Yes, I'd love to. So this spot was, let's just say it was an award-winning spot. I'm very pleased to share that. And the fantastic situation around here is that the creative concept for this spot was built around the product and the platform. So it was for streaming audio platforms. So from there, we can assume that most people are listening with headphones. Let's keep that in mind. And the client bought a 3D audio product. So as you know, 3D audio is where the spot is built with a spatialized sound design. And the important thing about that being baked in from the beginning of the ideation stage is that 3D audio spots really do best when the script has as few words as possible to allow the sound design to breathe and to tell this rich story through theater of the mind. So in this spot, we played with the psychoacoustics through sound design. That's why we all felt like we were at this lovely summer garden party. We could hear the chatter and the jazz in the background. And then we brought in a little bit of ASMR with the softness of the voice. And the VO was designed to make you feel as relaxed as if you'd just been handed a Paloma at the actual garden party. So it transported us through theater of the mind. Her read was beautiful. And there's an example of how to do a disclaimer. If you know you're going to have a disclaimer in your spot, bake it in from the beginning. give the VO artist enough time to make that piece of information as enjoyable as the beginning of your spot, and leave your audience on a warm and fuzzy note. Don't just like throw on a disclaimer in a different voice and cram it in because you wanted to make the most of the other 25 seconds. So yeah, I just think with 3D audio, this minimal script and the maximum sound design and the psychoacoustic play of environment around us, it's one of my favorite spots that Studio Resonate has produced recently.
Well, thank you for sharing it with us, and it's a great example of being very intentional from the start. You make a great point on the disclaimers, because we had, the T-Mobile spots, both of those where about halfway through the ad, I chose to shift gears into disclaimer land, which I also don't want to like completely disparage that, where it's like, sometimes I think we can be too harsh as advertising professionals on something sounding broadcasty or whatever, where Jane and Joe public probably are more gracious or not bothered, or it doesn't, it's like, it's not one of the 7 deadly sins, but you showed with this ad how you can be intentional and just resisting that pull of gravity down and actually do something different with it, which is super cool. So if people want to contact you and talk to Studio Resonate, or if they wanted to attend Audio is Magic, how do they do that?
Yeah, so definitely check out audioismagic.com. We've tried to transform a little bit of the illusionary magic into a web experience, and there's a sign-up form on there if you have interest in attending one of our future sessions. And of course, visit studioresonate.com for more information about the wonderful team within SiriusXM Media.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chelsea. This was a very inspiring episode. There's so much opportunity. I really believe that, to really be intentional with audio. And I do think audio is uniquely, it's so easy to not be super intentional. It's easy to just crank stuff out. So it's like you only have to go like an inch further to actually make work that is like interesting and cool, because it's just so easy to go like, oh, whatever, it's just talking points and we'll just have somebody record it. But I think these are great examples that we went through. And like I said, for all the chief audio officers listening, definitely go to Audio is Magic. Absolutely. At least go look at the site. And Chelsea, again, thank you so much for being on Ad Infinitum.
Thank you, Stu. It's been a pleasure. And I agree, the potential with audio is infinite.
I love that. Thank you, Chelsea. The potential with audio sure is infinite, and that's why we'll keep coming back to Ad Infinitum. Thanks again for being on the show today and sharing your wealth of knowledge. And for our listeners, you can find out more about Chelsea's work at Studio Resonate by visiting SiriusXM's website. And remember, if you like what you heard today, show us some love with an honest 5-star review, and let me know if there's an ad you want us to feature on the show, or an aspect of audio advertising you want us to cover. You can email me directly at stew@oxfordroad.com. That's STEW at oxfordroad.com. And also visit Magellan.ai/ad infinitum to sign up for a free demo of the Magellan platform. That's what we use to analyze the top spenders and podcasts for the show. So you can go to Magellan.ai/ad infinitum to get a free demo of the Magellan podcast platform. And one more thing before you go. We had Oscar Sarander on from Wondercraft on the last episode, and he took a Toyota ad that we had analyzed and took it into the Wondercraft platform to improve it using their technology, all the way from the copywriting through the sound effects, the music and the voices, and had a lot of fun with it. And so with no further ado, here's the result.
Well, howdy there, folks. Let me tell you about something special we got down here on Old Toyota Ranch. You see, picking out an SUV is a lot like choosing a good horse. You want one that's going to be there for you through thick and thin, rain or shine. Now them Toyotas, they're just like our most trusted steeds around these parts. Reliable as the day is long, and they keep their value better than a prize-winning stallion. That's why they're the #1 resale value brand for 2024, according to them folks over at Kelley Blue Book. Whether you're looking at that newly spruced up Land Cruiser, the roomy Grand Highlander, or even the nimble RAV4, available in regular, hybrid, and that newfangled plug-in hybrid, you're getting yourself a trusty companion for the long haul.
Remember, partner, when you saddle up with a Toyota, you ain't just buying a ride for today. You're investing in a horse that'll still fetch a pretty penny when it comes time to trade her in down the road. So mosey on over to buyatoyota.com and see what kind of deal you can rustle up. Toyota, let's hit the trail and go places.
There you have it. That was a lot of fun. Thank you, Oscar, and the entire team at Wondercraft. And that was just playing around in Wondercraft for a few minutes to work on that Toyota ad. I liked a few things in there, the sound design, the music, the different voices, all to get engagement up. So much to explore with Wondercraft. We've been using them a lot here at Oxford Road, and I recommend you check them out at wondercraft.ai. And until next time, remember to have fun making the ads work.